All right, it's 6:30, so Pete wanted me to first say a few things. Yep, starting. You guys. So I am recording this, so if you guys want to check it out later, by all means, please do. I'll share the link posted to the Meetup website. Also, if you want to share it with anybody who's not able to make it, absolutely, I'd love more people to be able to see this. Before I get started, Pete asked me to talk about CodeWritersWorkshop.com, which is an upcoming event on October 2nd, which is not just about writing code, not about writing apps, not from a technical perspective, but everything else that developers do, whether it's music, writing, art, and how all that comes together to make good developers who help create these better software experiences. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. So my name's Andy Trice. I'm a developer advocate with IBM, and today I want to talk about smarter apps with cognitive computing. When I'm talking about smarter apps with cognitive computing, I'm not going to go into the theory about how cognitive computing works and how you're extracting information from something, but more from the perspective of how you can start integrating cognitive computing services inside of your own applications to make them do more so that you're able to get the most out of them. One other thing I want to say, because we're a pretty small audience here. If you guys have questions or you want to know anything, please don't hesitate. Raise your hand, ask a question, because a lot really comes out of just the dialogue that we can have together. So with that, before I get started, my name is Andy Trice. I said that already. On Twitter, I'm Andy Trice. Feel free to heckle me if you want. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Part of my role as a developer advocate is to help developers be successful, and not just developers, but stakeholders, vendors, all your projects be successful. And so if I can answer any question to help you be successful, I'm more than happy to do that. By show of hands real quick, how many developers in the room? Okay, about half. How many managers? One manager. And how many people are just interested from more like the cognitive computing or data science perspective? Okay, it's a good number of hands also. So I come from the development background, so I'm really nose down into the code very often, but I like to poke my head up and kind of share the types of things that we're able to create. And the first thing I want to do is start with a demo to kind of show you what I'm talking about and what we're able to do, and then go into just what are the different services that we've pulled together in order to make this happen, and then go into actually some of the code so that you can see it's actually quite easy to integrate a lot of these different solutions. And but by show of hands, I asked developers, how many people are actually developing mobile apps? A smaller number of hands. My primary focus is on mobile apps, so that what I'm going to be showing is some back-end code, but also some Objective-C for native iOS application. But I'd be happy to answer questions on any other topic if I can. So I'm sharing the screen of my phone right here. I can see it actually is my phone. If I turn it sideways, we can get it nice and confused. Awesome. And what I've done is I've created an experience very much like the smart personal assistant that you might have on your iPhone, whether you have it on your Android phone, whether you have it on a Microsoft phone, or now on Windows 10. That gives you the ability to interact with your device very, very simply and create essentially a voice-driven application. And just to do this, I'm going to ask it a question. It's using one of the IBM Watson services that's pointing at a healthcare-related data set. So I can ask it questions related to healthcare, kind of like, what are the symptoms of a heart attack? And it will check it. It's actually asking the server, hey, we got a transcript back that said, what are the symptoms of a heart attack? And then we've got our answers. These answers are coming from that data set where it's actually taking the transcript of the spoken language, turning that into text, taking the text and then sending it to a natural language processing service so that we can ask it questions. So you could type in free text, whatever you want, it would be able to understand and answer the question. Or in this case, we're eliminating that typing step and doing automation through voice processing. And it should... Oh no, I can't get the sound out of it right now. But if I didn't have this plugged in for the screen sharing here, you'd be able to hear it actually talk back to me as I'm clicking on it. Likewise, it's not just me, so anybody want to ask it a question? Anything like, what are the symptoms of Parkinson's? What are the risks of smoking? Anybody? Just prove it's not me. Somebody? Go ahead. Oh, whoops. Hold on.
What's a syncope?
Hold on.
What's a syncope?
I don't know what that is, so hopefully it knows what it is.
It's a type of heart attack.
Okay. I don't know if it spelled it correctly, but it said, what's a sync, S-I-N-K, and then space API. So the voice recognition, shoot me down, right? My first demo. But we can say, what are the symptoms of Parkinson's? And it'll come up. Oh, wait a minute, as soon as I hit stop. If it's absolutely silent and there's no echo, it'll stop automatically the way I've set this up. And that's in the code that I've written. But otherwise...
Here, I'll add another.
Okay.
How do you prevent arthritis?
And it came up very quickly. How do you prevent arthritis? And then, so I will say that the data set that I'm working with here, I've got it right here. It's kind of small, but you see confidence 4.99%. It's not real confident on how you prevent arthritis. The confidence level is based upon the data set that this is trained on. The data set this is trained on is based upon like some public data from the CDC, so it's not a comprehensive, it knows everything about medicine. It's more like a sample data set to show you how to work with the service. But rather than focusing on specific pieces of like what this data set is, because this is not like a super extensively trained data set, I'd like to focus on the different parts of the system, because if you want to create a more well-trained data set or more comprehensive data set, then that can definitely be done, because this is the same technology. Who remembers Watson at playing the game Jeopardy, like in the 90s? Or maybe it was 2000s, it wasn't 90s. Okay, the hands. This is the same technology that was used, but much more highly evolved, to beat human players in Jeopardy. So it's all about what data the different services have been trained to understand. And when you're using Watson services, you're using a custom data set, usually particularly to you, because it's not, the Jeopardy data set isn't what necessarily what it's working on for your specific APIs or your specific instances. But when we're building voice-driven applications, there's two things that the app needs to do. One is translating spoken language into text. So it analyzes the actual waveform, the audio that's audible signal coming from your voice, and what's happening is it's actually capturing it, saving it as a file on here, and I'll get to that in a little bit more detail in a moment, and then taking that, turning it into text, then using that text transcript to then perform an action. Now, you don't have to use a Watson service for QA, like the natural language processing. You could say, oh, I've got this, I've got my transcript, I want to search it for keywords, then act upon keywords, and that way you could have, let's say, instructions, like if you wanted to, if you think about like voice control inside of a car, the way that works is it captures your voice, translates into text, then searches that text for keywords, so you can say, play radio, play song, skip song, and it's taking that, acting on the keyword, and then performing the operation based upon what it thinks that you're doing. What I've chosen to do is use several services from IBM to put this into place. And the first of it is the first thing I'm using is IBM Bluemix. IBM Bluemix is a composable cloud services platform, so essentially platform as a service. And I say composable because there are lots of options on Bluemix for different services, different components that you can include in your applications. If you sign up for Bluemix and start using it, doesn't mean you're going to use absolutely everything. You can pick and choose which components that you want to use. The second part that I'm using is the IBM Watson Cognitive Computing Platform. And let me actually jump over, before I jump into the Watson, let me show you what's available on Bluemix. This is kind of hard to see here, but there are lots of different services. This is a catalog. If you go to bluemix.net, all the different services that you can see that you have options to include within your apps. I'm going through this rather quickly because there's a lot of them. But it's everything from, if you want a basic runtime, like Java or Node.js or PHP, Python, Ruby, whatever it might be, we can host those like initial environments so that you can build your applications. Or if you want something like we were talking about Watson, and we look at the Watson services, the Watson services that have been made available are things like image recognition, so you can do extraction of faces, extraction of metadata from images, language services, so we can say it's taking audio taking a language in English, turning that into Spanish, turning it into French, so you can actually do translation services. You can do personality insights, so from a body of text, it will derive insights from the author, so it'll give characteristics of the person who actually authored that text by analyzing the body of text. There's the question and answer service, which is right here, which is actually what I used to take my transcript of spoken text and then run a natural language search against it. There's two data sets that are available kind of like for demos and for general use to start getting into it. One is based upon travel data. One is based upon this subset of healthcare information from CDC. So the healthcare one is the one that I'm actually have been using. Then there's the speech-to-text service, so you're taking speech, spoken language, you're turning it into text. There's text-to-speech services, which is the exact opposite, where you can take your text and turn it into an audio file that it's able to speak it back to you. One of the coolest demos that I've seen is these two services, speech-to-text, hooked to the QA service, which is the same one I'm using, and they hooked it up through a service that's available on Bluemix called Twilio, and it uses telephony, so you can actually, from a phone call, talk to it. It uses speech-to-text to take the transcript, answer your question with the QA service, and then it'll speak it back to you all across the phone. So you can build these kinds of apps. It doesn't have to be on a server. There are server aspects of it. It doesn't have to be on the phone, but you can integrate it into different kinds of systems. Then there's also, like I mentioned, image recognition. There's cognitive commerce, cognitive graph. These are all Watson services that are available on Bluemix. There are mobile services that are on Bluemix, and this leads me to the third part of the application I built, which it leverages Ibm Mobilefirst. Ibm Mobilefirst is a platform for building your apps where you get operational analytics, you get logging, you can understand what kinds of users or what people are doing within your app. You can do remote logging, so you can do kind of debug sessions if there's errors. It does automatic error capturing. Push notification, you can do multi-platform push notification to like iOS and Android with literally like one line of code. The push notification service is really nice on here. And let's see. Presence Insights, which is like a location-aware beacon service. So if you want your apps that respond to physical locations, you can tie into the Presence Insights service for that. On top of all that, there's different web and application components that you can use on Bluemix. There are Devops services, so if you want to set up your services for auto-scaling, monitoring analytics, tracking, planning. If you want security, data is a big one. Let's look at data. These are a lot of the different data services that are available on Bluemix. There's everything from NoSQL databases to data warehousing services to relational databases. So any kind of essentially database as a service that you could possibly want, there's a solution for it on Bluemix. So that's kind of in a nutshell, really quickly, going through some of the features that are on Bluemix. I highly, highly, highly recommend you check it out if you're interested in building a new app, whether it's an app on like a Node.js server, whether it's an app on a mobile device. There is infrastructure here that is very, very easy to set up, and you can also scale it basically with the click of a button. So if you need to go 1, 2 to 100 servers, just click on the button and you can scale up to meet whatever kind of demand that you have. So let me jump back over to my presentation. So I mentioned the third part is Ibm Mobilefirst, which is enterprise app infrastructure. The mobile services that I showed on Bluemix are part of the Mobilefirst platform. Mobilefirst, this is one thing that I want to make clear because it can be slightly confusing. There's actually Mobilefirst on Bluemix. There's also a separate product from IBM called Mobilefirst Platform Foundation Server. Mobilefirst Platform Foundation Server is like a standalone server product built on top of Liberty server, and it gives you the ability to expose like all of your in-house systems out for mobile applications. It gives you the tools to not only expose the data, but to collect logs, to track analytics, to manage push notifications. What I'm talking about is Mobilefirst on Bluemix, which is the cloud implementation of these services. And with that, I do want to say that you can try Bluemix services for free. And whether you want to check out the mobile first services, whether you want to check out just the Node.js services to have a hosted infrastructure or the data services, I strongly recommend that you use this URL because that goes back to me and I actually get credit. So this goes to a registration page. So if you want to check it out, ibm.biz/MoDevDC. And the case actually does matter. So capital N, capital D, and then capital DC. Take pictures. It'd be awesome. I'll give you guys a minute. Got to get credit. As soon as I see all the cameras drop, then I'll keep going.
Does this take us to the same place as the link that came on the invite?
Yes.
Okay.
With the link that was in the comments yes, it is the same one. So it's a registration page, and from there you can register for Bluemix, and from there you can deploy an app, the backend infrastructure for an app, in minutes, and I'm not kidding at all. Okay, I think all the phones are down. Yeah.
Is there something other than IBM's site search to find help for this stuff? Because having worked with IBM in the past, trying to find anything in terms of documentation or anything else is a catastrophe.
So
it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
There is documentation for every service that's out there.
Right.
There is also a very active and very closely monitored Stack Overflow group. So you can search Stack Overflow for answers. You can also post questions, and there are multiple teams. So there's developer advocacy teams, and also some of like the educational and the content teams, and also the product teams monitor Stack Overflow. So it's if you can't find it in the docs, ask there, and you will get an answer. That one, the teams are pretty active and very adamant about making sure that we're able to answer questions for end users to meet their needs. So now let's dig into the details. And what do I have next? I'm going to jump over to code in just a second, and I'm going to share this link. I'll post it on the comments of all these links on the meetup. But the app that I showed you, the client-side code as well as the back-end, the Node.js code that shows you how to interact with the services is all available on GitHub. Right here, and like I said, it's github.com/tricem and IBM Watson Speech QAIOS. I'll post that in the meetup group so that you guys don't have to remember it, because even in your pictures, it's going to be really hard to read. I've done a write-up about all of this so that you can get more detail, like if you want to read it later or you want to share it with somebody. I did a walkthrough of it, but I'm also going to be posting this recording, so there's going to be tons of, if you want to check it out further, everything's going to be available. So let me go ahead now and actually jump over to, oh look, there's IBM Mobilefirst. I think I was going to show this earlier, not sure if I did. This is just a landing page for Mobilefirst on Bluemix, and it kind of highlights what all the different pieces are. Why don't I just go ahead? I'm going to, before I show this app, I'm going to go just to bluemix.net. This page still thinks I'm not logged in, so let me refresh it. I'm going to go to my dashboard, and I want to show you how easy it is to create an app on Bluemix. So this is my dashboard where I can see all of my apps. If I want to create an app, and in this case, I'm going to say I want to create a new mobile app. There's mobile app here on the far left. Oh, whoops. No. Sorry, they changed the UI on me. Yeah, we're going to do create app. And it says, do you want to make a web app? Do you want to make a mobile app? We're going to say mobile. Do you want to do Android, iOS, hybrid? I'm going to choose iOS 8 because this has basically the same services that I use in the app that I just showed you. And then you need to give your app a name. The name does need to be unique because this corresponds to the domain name that gets given to your services. And we're going to call this MoDev Test. So once I do this, this is actually running through, it's setting up the server infrastructure. It's building everything that I need to start hosting a mobile application. And it's not going to build the UI for you, but it's going to give you all the backend infrastructure that you can then use to power your app. So if you want to deliver data and be able to monitor it and have push notifications, all this. This should take just a second. Okay, application is starting. Should redirect us. All right. At this point, it's going to give us steps on how to start integrating with your code. I'm not going to worry about those right now because my app already exists, and I'll go into that in a second. Once I do that, this sets up the project for me. So we can see right here, there's the Node.js component. So this is a full Node.js server instance. Like I said, if you want to increase the number of instances, increase the amount of memory, you can just scale it up just by interacting with these drop-down menus here, hit save, and it scales up or down based upon whatever your need might be. Then there's advanced mobile access, which is this is a service for operational analytics, logging, user authentication, integrating with identity providers, and I'll get into more of that in a second. Then the default template gives you automatically a Cloud NoSQL database, which is a NoSQL data store for your mobile apps, and then a push notification service for managing push notifications. You can manage push notifications across, to individual devices, to classes of devices. You can create tags. So if you have your devices tagged with essentially certain text strings, you can say, send this to all my devices that are tagged for MoDev, and it'll send a push notification to all those. And it's very, very easy to do. So you don't have to build the infrastructure for managing who gets what notifications. The service manages all that for you. So that's how you set up the mobile infrastructure. And then let's say I want to go ahead and I want to start adding these Watson services. I can click Add a Service or API, which was right there. I tried to zoom in, but apparently too late. And let's say I want to add the speech-to-text service. You see, we've got it right here. I just have to click on it. It's going to ask me to choose my plan. We'll just choose a standard plan. You can go into... someone asked about the docs. There's a link right here before it goes. It was right there. It says View Docs. So there's links right on every one of those pages for the docs. And then it's going to ask me to restage. And if I go back to my dashboard, you'll see that we've now got our mobile app. We've added the Watson service to it. Oops. Go back to MoDev test. And we've now got our speech-to-text service. Just by doing that, it's now been made available. We can use it within our app. So when we're using it, I'm going to start with the back end before I start with the client, the front-end application, because it's easier to think about how these systems interact by starting at the Node.js tier. Because what's happening is the client application that's on the phone, when we do the transcription service, the first thing that it does is captures the audio, saves it as a WAV file, and there's a narrowband, there's a broadband model. I'm using this with the broadband model, but there's a narrowband model, and which just means it's essentially a lower res audio file. But capture WAV file, that gets sent to the Node tier, which then delegates out to the Watson tier. And the Watson services, basically everything's available as REST services, but what you want to do is make all the requests from your mobile app go through the Node tier to go into the individual services, because each one of these has separate authentication credentials. And if you're running in Node, the Node infrastructure on Bluemix based on environment variables, already knows all the authentication credentials for each one of these services. So you don't have to embed authentication credentials for these services inside your app on your phone. So if someone were to decompile your app or something, they could get that authentication credentials. You don't want that to happen. Put them in Node. They're in memory through environment variables, and you can make requests. So this is just doing standard HTTP post, going to my Node service. Node is then just going to speech to text. And let me show you what the code for that looks like. Actually, before I do that, so I mentioned everything's available as RESTful services. There's also a project on GitHub from the Watson team, the Node.js wrapper. So this is on GitHub. Watson Developer Cloud there's multiple projects that are open source from Watson on there. The Node.js wrapper, and there are other wrappers for other languages that are out there also, wraps all the Watson service APIs. So I don't have to know all the endpoints. I don't have to know all the intricate, I say intricate details, not that intricate, but I don't have to worry about a lot of the programming for specifics for this because the Watson service has already wrapped it. So if I come into here, this is in my Node.js application on the Node.js side. I'll zoom in, and we can see that in Node.js, I'm requiring the Watson Developer Cloud library. And once I do that, I can set up these services by just saying, my question and answer healthcare service is just watson.questionanswer, and then I'm passing in my credentials. My blog is in a little bit more detail about setting up credentials, and But basically, I mentioned earlier that these are based on environment variables. If you're running your Node app locally for debugging, then you're going to want to set your credentials locally, pass them into the service once it's instantiated. If you pass them in blank, it's going to pull it from the environment variables. And this is all that you have to do is create an instance from the Node wrapper of the Watson question and answer service. And then we're going to be able to start asking questions. So right here is this transcribe service that I was talking about. So what I'm doing, the Watson template, the Bluemix template, when you create your app, it also sets it up for Express.js, which is a framework for building applications on Node.js. So all that I have to do is add a post handler for the transcribe key, which is basically like you have my server domain /transcribe. I just do an HTTP post to that, and I'm posting a multi-part form post, and the audio file is on that request. And so I'm accessing right here request.files.audio because my file is just named audio, and that right there gives me a handle to the audio file. Then I have create a read stream, which is basically just creating a stream that can be read into memory. And we've got some parameters that are going to get passed into Watson service where I'm saying, here's the read stream. My content type is audio/L16, which is basically the audio codec saying it's 1600 hertz, and it's mono, so there's one channel on it. And then once we have the handle to the file and the parameters so that Watson can understand what's the format of this audio, when we want it to recognize the text, all that we have to do is look at our speech-to-text service, where the speech-to-text service was just created from that Watson node wrapper, and call the recognize function. Once it's with that, we pass in the parameters that we just looked at, and then once it completes, we have this callback. If you're not familiar with Node.js, this might look a little funny, but it's essentially a function that gets invoked, and then we have a callback, and that callback happens when the response comes back to the server, whether it's successful or whether there's an error. We have the error code and we have the response value, so we can see if there's an error, return an error message. Otherwise, all that we have to do is look at the response results. We can see if it's greater than 0. We're going to loop over them, and this uses a filter function. So, projector's really bright right there, which is basically like MapReduce functions in JavaScript. Like filtering down collections, so we get essentially, I have another function that says is final. When you're getting the results back from Watson, it's going to return multiple values of what it thinks you said, and one of them is we identified as final. So what we're doing is we're finding the final result, and then we're going to return that to the server. And like I said, this code is all available on GitHub if you want to get into more detail and step through it, like set breakpoints and see what each piece does. So once we do that, at that point now, we've taken that audio input, and it's returning a transcript back to the mobile, or to wherever it was requested. This could be if you're in a browser on the desktop and you submit an audio file and have it return that to you, or it can be, like I said, it could be the mobile client submitting a file and then it gets the response back and then it handles it. So let's jump over to Xcode where I've got a lot of this already in place. So if I go to my view controller, I've kind of put everything into one file to try and make it easy to talk through. But what happens, I'm not going to go too much into the audio recording logic right here just because I'll tell you what it's doing. It's recording audio from the microphone on the local device. That's all it's doing. Then once we have that, it is, all this might look a little confusing. The key things here is I've got a logger. That's part of the Mobilefirst libraries. And I'll get into more detail of what that does, and we're sending a log message. Then we're using IMF resource request, which is essentially the Mobilefirst wrapper around, I think it's NSURL request, which is a networking call on iOS. And we're doing requests with path, and the path is the, that's further up in the code, but it's just the URL to which the file is being posted. So we're going to request with path, and we're going to give it the URL where we're posting. And then all this right here, which looks really confusing, you see content type, content disposition, it's just packaging all that up into an HTML multi-part form post. that sounds really confusing because we're handling a binary file. If you're just processing text or something like that, you don't have to jump through all that. So I probably should have started with the QA one earlier first because that one's a little bit easier. But once we have that, we're just setting the body of the request, and then that request is being sent to the service that I just showed you on Node.js. And when you say send with completion handler, we've got this callback that happens once the request comes back from the server. Now, once we have it, we can get the JSON object, which is from that response, and then we can start working with it. So I'm going to look for the key transcripts of the transcript property of that object, and once I have that, I'm checking, was there an error? No. Was it an empty string? No. If not, then let's do something with it. And if we scroll down a little bit, right, okay, there it was. I was right there. I'm calling another function called requestQA with the result string. The result string is a transcript that we just got back from the Watson service. So it took that audio file, turned it into text, handed it back to us. We display it in the UI, which I was saying I'm making the request, and while it's making the request in the main thread, because iOS is multi-threaded, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm taking the query label, which is oops, let me jump back over here. Which is this label right here, which says, what can Watson help you with today? So I'm setting that value, and then while I'm setting that in the background, it's making another request to the QA service, and I'll get to that in a second. And just to show you again, what are the risks of smoking? So we see it right here. What are the risks of smoking? And then it comes back. And it's much more confident about those answers than it was about the question that you had asked.
Why is that?
This is, it all is based on the data set. So it's not necessarily logic, it's about what's the data that it's been trained to understand. And one of the most common questions I get is, can Watson be trained to learn from other data sets? The answer is absolutely yes. But we only make these two data sets, which are rather limited, available to the public. And in order to have a custom data set or trained to be on like proprietary domain data, then it needs an engagement with IBM in order to be able to train Watson to understand it. So there's that part where I've shown you we're taking an audio file, we're just doing a post to the server. On the server, we're just taking it, we're calling the Watson wrapper, and then we're getting that transcript and we're acting upon it. And I mentioned earlier, I'm passing it off to the QA service for natural language processing right now, but you could just as easily have taken that text transcript and say, forget about the Watson QA service. Say, if I just want you to use that to invoke actions on something else, parse it for keywords, determine actions. It's going to be up to you to build the logic around your keywords, but then you could do that to invoke some other kind of action. Or if you wanted to call the Watson transcription service, which this is actually the next demo that I want to build, not transcription, the translation service, so I can ask it a question in English. It gives me, let's say, a Spanish or a French translation of it, kind of like Google Translate. But if you want to build it into your own applications, you can use these types of services and this kind of approach to do so. But as I also said, that doesn't have to be on a mobile device. That could be in a desktop app. You could have your server infrastructure on-premise calling into the Watson services because, let's say, you have messages or comments from some enterprise store and you want those translated into another language, or you want those analyzed for some reason. You can hand off that analysis, that translation, the language services, all that to Watson if you want to. So you have lots of different options on how you could go about integrating right here. Now let me jump back over to the Node side, and let's look at my ask request. So what's happening here is, again, it's going to use the Watson services, and it's going to handle the URL /ask. So it'll be my server /ask. And that's going to take query parameters. So I'm not doing a post this time. I'm just doing a regular URL request. It's got query parameters that contains the text transcript. And right here, we've got our question and answer healthcare service that was from that Node.js wrapper. And we're going to call the ask method, and we're going to pass in the text. Once we have that text, like the Watson service is going to give us a response based upon the query text. And I could go through all this, but basically what it's doing is it's returning an array of responses based upon what it was able to discern from the natural language processing. So it takes that transcript, it tries to figure out what you're asking, and then it's going to ask what's called the data corpus, which is that trained data set. And that's going to return you values and also a confidence level of how confident it is as far as being able to answer that question. So if I jump back over to here again, here I was showing the confidence level where it's giving me a confidence of 64% for this answer. So that's fairly confident, but the one that I know works. What are the symptoms of a heart attack? Those should be, I think, in the 90s. Fingers crossed. Oh no, come on. That one's only at 57%. Okay, but anyway, the more trained and the more comprehensive your data set is, the more confidence it's going to have in the response. And when we're making that request from the application side, it's just, again, I'm using IMF resource request, so it's making a network request to that URL. It's got the query parameters, and then when it comes back, we are, where did I do it? Okay, I'm just taking the search data, which is an array, and then I'm handing it off to another view, which I'm not going to get into too much detail because this is specific to iOS and writing with Xcode. But if I look at my interface, let's go Xcode. I blame Xcode on this one. I have essentially two screens. I've got the intro screen, and then I've got a table view. And in my table view, it's got the content and it's got the confidence level. So basically, I'm just handing it off to my other view. It's using it's using Objective-C UI table view, and it's looping over that data, and it's just stuffing it into a table. So that's all that's happening there. You could take that and you can put it in your UI somehow. You could make that actionable. You can make it, I don't know, part of some kind of analysis workflow. You could integrate it pretty much anywhere. And just to also show you kind of how flexible it is as far as where you might be consuming these, let me go ahead and open this link in a new tab. I've got that exact same service available on the live server. So this is actually the node server that's being used to host the Watson services, or being the middle tier for the Watson services. And I've got a couple canned responses here where I can say, what are the symptoms of Parkinson's disease? It's going to give me these. And if I copy the link address, oh no, it's not going to do that because it's doing an AJAX request. Shoot, I don't have an easy way to ask that. Actually, yes, I do. We'll do ask Dr. Washington / ask query is, what are the symptoms of a stroke? So basically, this is, I know this is not easy to read, but you can see this is how we're asking it the questions. It's free text. The response is a JSON object. You can use that in your apps however you want. So it's very, very easy to integrate. And I've taken the response from Watson. It gives you a lot more metadata than what I'm showing here, what I'm returning. And what I've done is I stripped out to only the fields that I actually wanted to deliver to the mobile client to reduce the size of the data in transit from the server to the client application. So far I've shown you Bluemix. I've shown you Watson. Watson has lots of power, like the cognitive computing platform, the language services, image recognition, facial recognition, and being able to do all these insight services, translation services. There's a lot involved there. And I'm showing you literally the tip of the iceberg. Yes?
The couple of content domains that you can ask about were limited to the two that you mentioned. The other natural language processing, entity resolution, whatever the ones you have in there,
mm-hmm.
Are those similarly circumscribed, or are they more generally useful? More
generally useful. So the QA service is the one it has to have a trained data corpus in order to be able to handle the natural language processing. But if you want to do speech to text, you can ask it in English. You can ask it, I think, English, Spanish, French, and I think Japanese. I think those are the languages that are supported right now. I might be wrong on one of those, but I think that's what they are. And so you can do anything in those. If you want to do the speech to text, text to speech, also, there's certain languages supported, but pretty much the entire English language is supported, and the other languages. So, yes, the QA service is the one that needs that specially trained data set. Everything else is more general. But I talked about Bluemix, talked about Watson. The other thing that I've talked about but I haven't shown is the Mobilefirst platform. So IBM Mobilefirst. And where this comes into play, the Mobilefirst on Bluemix is about giving you information about your apps that are out in the field, what's happening and what's running on them. And that's part of the Advanced Mobile Access Service. What also is technically under the MobileFirst brand when you're doing these is the Cloud at NoSQL DB, which is part of that template, which I'm not using in this app, but that's data store, which gives you offline data store. And also the Cloud team just released out on GitHub this week encrypted client-side data store, so you can do local storage and have that automatically replicate up to the cloud store. So if you're offline, you can still have data that's been cached or data you can be saving data, and as soon as you go online, it automatically syncs it back up to the cloud. So that's cloud and stuff. I could go on for another hour just about that. Then there's a push notification service. That's part of the MobileFirst brand. But what I want to show you right now is Advanced Mobile Access, and I have that already up. Or did I close it? Okay. Advanced Mobile Access gives us logging, operational analytics, and also user authentication. So I can set up authentication on this where I can hook it up to like an OAuth provider, kind of like Facebook or Google authentication, or I can do a custom OAuth provider. So if you have your own identity management provider, you can use that for user authentication. I don't have it in this sample using user authentication, but if I wanted to, it's actually very easy to set up user authentication. All I have to do is actually go into the version that I have for my app, add new authentication, and this is where I could say I want to use a social network for authentication for identity provider, or if I want to do a tie into a custom OAuth provider. So most enterprises have some sort of identity provider, and you can hook into that. But what I really wanted to show is I'm jumping around all over the place here. Oh, whoops. I want to stay here. I want to go into monitoring because I want to show what the MobileFirst platform, the logging, the analytics, what it captures. So right now I can see, I think I'm looking at it for the last 30 days. I can see by week how many active devices are on my app. This is my app that's basically running on my phone, and a while ago it was running on multiple devices. And you can see it's active on these. But if I had 10,000 devices that were active, I'd be able to see how many of those devices are on a given day, or if I want to go down to the day level, or if I want to go down to the hour level. And if you're going down to hour, you really want to narrow the data set. But I can see how many devices are active. I can see all the different requests that have been made to the server. So I can see what are the URLs people are hitting. These are spark lines, so I can see what's your average round trip time, what's the total time, the number of requests, and you can see general usage of load. And you can drill in. There's more data for a lot of these. Where if I want to see, usage, how many people are actually viewing the app. So you can see at any point in time, if there's, like I said, 10,000 devices, or if I have 100,000 devices out there, how many people are actually using this at any point in time? How many of them are new users? You can see none of these are new users because it's all me using it. I can go in and I can see the network requests and say, oh look, here's my network round trip time, and I can see, wait a minute, right here, does that really say 1 million milliseconds? Yes, it does. That's because I introduced the bug when I was developing it. But I can come in, I can see, oh wow, there's a big peak on that week. Go into the day, and I can actually go into the hour, and I can see that, oh look, probably want to shorten the data set, but I can see at 4 p.m. things took off and were taking a really long time. But by the time we got to, that's not at 4 p.m. Oh no, I see what the thing is. I need to narrow my data set. But what I could do is actually go in and see specifically like at what points in time that you can see things peaked, and then I could take that and see how many devices were active at that point in time. What were the device logs? I can actually come in and see from a time range, narrow in on it, and I can see essentially what's the equivalent of developer logs for the app that's running on the client. So all these messages that you see are actually coming from the client application. Anybody familiar with Log4j for Java? Okay. It's a logging framework. And what that gives us the ability to do is set log levels, and you can say if I want to write out the bug messages or informational messages, or I want to write out error messages. And I can set it up so I'm writing all those out, and those from, if I have all these devices out in the field, I can be collecting error messages from every error for every device that's happening out there. And I also can come in and see, if I go to Fatal, we'll hit search, I can also see crash reporting. So if the app did crash in this time period, I'm automatically going to get all the crash reporting for that from my mobile app. So that is what the MobileFirst platform adds to the mix. So I showed you there's Bluemix, which is cloud services. There's Watson, which is cognitive computing. Let me pull this up. There's a lot of services. There's also a lot of really great demos that are out there. Like I said, there's the language services. There's analytics, personality insights, extracting relationships between data, message resonance. There's all these. I highly recommend. You can go up to Bluemix and start checking these out and see what all the different options are. So there's Bluemix, cloud services platform, Watson, cognitive computing platform, and then Mobilefirst, which delivers all the analytics and authentication and essentially management of your application throughout its life cycle, specifically targeting mobile apps. And we do support, for the Bluemix services, native iOS, native Android, and also hybrid based upon a Cordova container. And with that, I would encourage you to sign up if you haven't already. Do I need to sit here longer? No. And also I want to say thank you. So, thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to come check this out. If you have any questions, anything, ping me on Twitter. I'm Andy Trice. I should have put my email address on here too. My email address, not that you remembered. If you need me to write it down, I will. amtrice@us.ibm.com. Don't forget to sign up for Bluemix here. And then all the code, everything is available. So if you want to take it, you want to explore it, you want to hand it to your developer teams, you say, look into this, see if we want to use it for our services. I'd love to be able to answer any questions to empower you guys.